Okay, one of our first skills is really how do we measure. So if we have a piece of lumber, we have a length, a width, and then we have a thickness to this as well. There's lots of different measuring tools that we can choose from for this. So the most standard one usually is going to be your tape measure. They're all very different. You can see this one has inches on the top and centimeters on the bottom, and then it's divided up into, there's our halves, our quarters, our eighths, our sixteenths. This one goes all the way down to 32nds, so it's a little hard to see, but you can see those fine lines would be 1/32 of an inch. And we can look at a different type. This one is helpful because it actually goes down and it tells you where you're at. So this is a half, that's 3/8, and then we can take half of that. So that would be 3/16, and then we could take half of that would be 3/32. So you'll have to familiarize yourself with the tape measure that you have. What you want to make sure when you are measuring something, if I want to measure the length of this, I don't want to go at a diagonal. I want to, because that will give me a longer measurement, I want to make sure that I'm going close to an edge and then seeing where that lines up. So this would be 11 1/8 of an inch. So I can use my tape measure, just familiarizing myself with how it works and what the measurements are, and making sure that I have, again, I'm not at an angle. You also have the ability to measure with something like this. This is a ruler with a slide on it. And what you can see is this helps you set a depth. So let's just say we're trying to measure 3 inches on this board. One option is to take our tape measure, and then we can push this down to set that there, put it close to the edge, and then I see my 3 inches right here, and I can put a V mark, that crow's foot, right at the 3 inches. So that would get me a mark there. And then what I'd want to do is I'd want to take either a speed square, so this has a lip here that falls in, and I can line it up to there, and I can draw across. Again, I want to use something with a sharp point like a pencil. If I use something with a thick point like a marker, that's going to be a little ambiguous. I'll just draw a line with the marker. Right? You can see that there's about 1/8 of an inch thickness there. So that's a little bit tricky of like, where is that line that I'm working on? So if this is the side that we want to keep, what we would do is we would put an X on this side. So I know when I bring my saw blade down, I want to bring it just to the right of that line and leave that exactly 3 inches. So that's one way you could do it. You could also put the square on the edge there, and you can see that that actually lines up at 3 inches really easily. That's great. You could set your depth here, so you could set this to 3 inches. And then when you're ready, you can put it on the edge, and you get it right there. There's lots of different ways that you can measure length with a tape measure or with a ruler. If we're looking at something like our width, though, that can be a little bit trickier. It's hard to see kind of where that falls. And so usually with width, we would use calipers. These are dial calipers. They're a little bit harder to use, but they're very accurate. And so what happens is when you open this up, you see different marks here. So this is 1 inch, 1.1, 0.2, 0.3. If I set this to be 1 inch, right there, I'm looking for at the 1 and the 0, right there, I can lock that in with this screw. That should be 1 inch 3 different ways. So it's 1 inch here, it's 1 inch here, and it's actually 1 inch depth. So this ruler is 1 inch, so there's 1 inch, right? There is 1 inch, and then even down here, that depth is 1 inch. So calipers take a little bit of practice, but are a great way to be able to measure things like our thickness. So if I wanted to know the thickness of this piece of wood, I can set it like that, and then I'd be able to read it. So this is 8 there. So if I come in a little bit, right? So that's 8.75. So it looks like this is 0.875. This is going down to my thousandths of an inch. Sometimes I don't need to know what the measurement is. I just want to hold it. So now I know that I'd have this measurement. If I want the depth, I could use that to drill a hole. Or if I just want to capture the measurement, I can go to this and I can drop it down. So put it on a flat surface, screw that in, and then there's my measurement again. And you can see it's a little bit more than 3/4 of an inch, so there's my 0.8. It's a little harder to tell on this one exactly what that measurement is. So that's where the calipers can really help you dial it in. So lots of different ways to measure. When we're looking at something being 90 degrees, a speed square or even a framing square is helpful for getting 90 degrees. All right, so the way to kind of learn this is just to practice, practice, practice. And then our last piece is if we want to know if we have a square piece of wood, we can measure our diagonals. So I can measure my diagonal here. I can measure my diagonal there. If those are the same, then I know that this is rectangular and it's not some parallelogram shape.